Dr. Nika here. I'm so excited that you're joining us. And I have my good friend, Dr. Jessica McCleese, who is a licensed psychologist as well as a Christian sex therapist. And I wanted to bring her in to just share with us some great thoughts for how couples can survive in this time of a pandemic. It's really, really tough for many people, and couples are no exception. So thank you so much, Dr. McCleese, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for us to be able to do this together.
Of course. All right, let's jump right in. So what are some challenges that you find couples are facing, particularly right now?
Yeah. So one of the biggest ones I'm finding in my work with couples is we have a situation now where couples probably haven't had to spend quite as much time together. And now many are actually quarantined together. So we have for the first time, kind of where there's no separation between work and home life. And so you're not getting those outside contacts. And it's actually really healthy in a marriage relationship to have friends outside of the marriage and to have some other relationships. So you're not 100% dependent on your I guess your emotional needs and intellectual needs being met by one person alone. And so this has been a huge struggle for people. All of a sudden they're having to figure out, what does it look like to not have time away from one another? And then they feel, first of all, a little bit guilty about that. How could I want time away when we've got this gift of time together? So that can be a problem. And then things that have been kind of below the surface, kind of trickling up every once in a while, little issues and concerns that have been annoyances and frustrations now seem much bigger because there's the added stress. And we know with stress, you can even have your best foot forward, or the worst of everything that you've ever been comes forward when we have enough stress. And that stress is definitely present. It's coming to us. We can't hide from it. It's a reality. So we're all having to figure out, how do we live in this new state of stress? So those little things are bubbling to the surface now.
Absolutely. And speaking of stress, when people are stressed, they tend to sort of reach for whatever feels accessible or easy or that will make them feel better, even if in the long run it can cause them some sort of harm. So for you, are there any sort of traps or quick fixes that couples can find themselves reaching for that often lead to more harm than good?
Yeah. So, all the things that were kind of acceptable before now become problematic. So maybe couples that enjoyed a glass of wine at dinner might find that now they want a bottle of wine. And so people that had a little bit of conflict, but then we could turn on the TV and just kind of zone out for a minute, are now finding that's all we do is turn on the TV and zone out. So couples can do one of two things under this stress. And what I see them doing is either we turn to conflict. So you and I remember learning about Dr. Karen Horney, who would teach you could either turn against, or turn away. Mm-hmm. And so couples sometimes turn against one another and there's a lot of conflict and fighting, or they turn away where they're kind of secluding themselves and they don't want to speak to one another because it's easier not to have to deal with that tension. So those would be kind of the quick things that people are going to that are going to be problematic if that behavior continues in the relationship.
Absolutely. And you might often find people wanting to lean into the option of turning away because you're like, I'm stuck here and I can't really go anywhere. So it's best to avoid it. And again, in the short term, that feels really, really good, but it just piles up. And after a while, the conflict is inevitable, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
For you, then, what advice or tips would you offer to couples in this time that they could really use to help themselves as well as their relationship?
Yeah. So we do need a little bit of time away from one another. In a situation like this, that's of course much more difficult to do, but most people don't live in a 1-bedroom home. And so you can, or in a studio apartment, so you can still find ways to have a little bit of that separation. And so that might mean that one person watches TV in the living room and another in the bedroom. Or if you only have one TV, it might mean one person sits in the bedroom for a little while the other sits in the living room, or it can be the kitchen and the living room, whatever you need to just have a little bit of space. And then I would say just be open with one another about needing some time. For most couples, that doesn't mean I need to not even see you in my presence. It just means I need a little bit of space so I can be with myself. And so even in the midst of a quarantine, we really can do that in a pretty healthy way where maybe you each just have your little bit of corner and you allow some space to do your own activity without feeling like everything has to be together, just simply because you're not occupying the space space together. So I would say do that. And then secondly, remember that you are a team. So I just mentioned Karen Horney a minute ago. And so one of the things that would make for a healthier relationship is to practice turning toward. So I would also remind couples, like, we can't help this. Neither one of you caused the pandemic. Neither one of you are in the place where you are the reason we're all quarantined. So it's kind of like us against the world. You can almost take on in your own marriage, not in the world is against us kind of way, but where you're saying, you know what, no matter what happens to us, no matter what stressor comes our way, no matter what financial difficulty or stress or concern comes, you and I got this, and we're going to decide together how do we move forward with whatever our goals are. So share your concerns, share your fears, share your vulnerabilities with one another, but choose not to hold that against one another, but to instead say, yeah, I'm feeling it too. Now, what should we do about it? And so I would say make sure you're turning toward as often as possible.
I like that idea a lot because, again, it's so easy to just sort of go off into your own worlds. And I would imagine even just the accessibility of our phones or tablets, that you could be next to your partner, but you have your earbuds in there, and you're like, we're together, but we're not. Or this is me time, but we're not exactly in our separate corners as you just shared. And so it sounds, based on what you're saying, another important idea is to communicate, right? Really be upfront about what your me time looks like. It can't be all day either. And when you do come together, like you're saying, turn toward each other and have those honest, vulnerable conversations about what you're respectively feeling and what you're both needing.
Yeah, absolutely. It is that balance, right? So we do need some time where even if you need me time, you do need couple time as well, because otherwise you're going to feel much more separated during time in the home than you ever were before. So if we're not feeling completely connected, we can blame it on a lot of things, right? Well, we both work all day. We only get a couple of hours a week together. But when you have all this time together and you're not using some of it to actually truly connect, it'll feel much more separated and lonely than it did even when you have just a little bit of time for one another. So we want to capitalize on it while still allowing for that alone time. Like you said, those good, clean boundaries that we create as well as we can.
Absolutely. And I would also imagine that in those times of connecting, that you can, and I know you talk a lot with your clients about like having date nights and being intentional about spending time together, and maybe even having some ground rules about what a date night looks like. And for some couples, there can be this feeling of, well, we're not sure what to do about this problem. We have a financial concern, or we have a family concern, and to not bring that always into couple time. So how would you recommend couples really be intentional about respecting what couple time looks like, and divorcing that, pun intended, from the other stressors that are, of course, in that room, in that house with them?
Yeah, so it's helpful to put a little bit of kind of boundary space on what you're doing when. So for people that are working from home now, especially, like you've got to learn, what does it look like to still shut my day off, just like if I was outside of the home working. So most of us had that, right? You work, I'm gonna just throw out times. You work from 9 to 5, and then you leave the office and you don't pick up things again because you've learned to honor that time. Well, that changes drastically when you're at home because it feels like you haven't ever really left work. So put boundaries on your time, kind of start and finish, even when that comes to, hey, we got to talk about our finances. Let's do that Thursday at 7 p.m. until 7:30. And then if we need to talk more, we'll do it on another day. So create really good time constraints on when you're going to have like talks, when you're going to have couple time. So even though date nights feel a lot different right now for a lot of people, because you're not going to go to a restaurant, you're not going to go to the movies. So your date night might become, hey, let's sit down, watch our favorite TV show. Let's sit close to one another, make sure we're actually touching. And that becomes date night. And so while we're doing that, we're not going to talk about difficulties or stress. We're really just going to enjoy the moment. And when you can't have those moments because the stress is too high, then you pivot. Now we're going to have a moment of just talking together and kind of planning out what we need to do next, and really have almost a working date where the goal is now to improve our current situation, not necessarily our emotional connection. So you just create time for both of those.
I love that. That's a fantastic idea. Really, really good stuff. I hope you guys are enjoying this, because this is golden, free things, I might add, that people pay lots for. So I really hope that you're getting all that you can from what Dr. McCleese is sharing. Is there any particular book or website or tool resource that you would recommend couples use right now?
Yeah, so I have two apps that I want to recommend. Both of them are going to cost just a little bit, but it's very nominal fee that you can do for access. So one of them is the Gottman Cards Deck app, and it might be easier to find that instead of going through your phone. It might be easier to find it on their website. So you can get to that at gottman.com/couples, and it'll give you a little place for resources, and it has the name of the app. It's Gottman Card Deck app. What that app does is it actually creates kind of like a question and answer type response that you can do with your spouse. So that way you're getting to facilitate some communication. Again, that can be really hard for couples that haven't spent this much time together. And so maybe they've been used to more practical conversation. What do we need to do with the kids? What's your schedule like this week? This opens up new conversation for couples. So it's a really great app. And then there's another app called the Ultimate Intimacy app. Same thing, it's talking about communication and conflict and emotional connection. So it kind of gives you the closest thing to a counseling or a coaching atmosphere that you can have without having someone guide it. So it's just through an app, but they do some little educational videos on that particular app and just help you learn a little bit about how to connect. So those would be the two that I would recommend.
Those sound good. And John Gottman is sort of A star, A plus kind of thing. So I know those are going to be amazing resources for couples. Mm-hmm. How can people find you? If they want to learn more, connect with you, what can they do?
Yeah, I would encourage just to head over to my site, betterthanthehoneymoon.com. I have an e-course coming out real soon that's going to be 100% free. That's all about communication and conflict resolution. And it seems really timely where we're living in this stage right now. So if you've been having some struggles, that's a way to get some free help.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. McCleese. And you can find those links right in the post that we will have along with this video. Please leave your comments, if you have questions, anything that you would like to learn more from either of us, please feel free to just let us know. And of course, you can catch more from me, Dr. Anica, by following me on Instagram or Facebook, and also going to my website, which is www.dranica.com. All right, we'll see you soon. Thanks again. Bye.
Thank you.